person receives. I'm Charlie Butts.
U.S. attack aircraft and even a bomber were called in to assist Afghan forces ambushed by the Taliban south of Kabul.
U.S. Forces Afghanistan tells Fox Army Apache gunships, drones, and even an Air Force B-1 bomber were sent to help repel a Taliban attack in the city of Ghazni, 90 miles south of Kabul, where the Taliban attacked local Afghan policemen from 2 directions. Local reports say at least 14 policemen were killed. A U.S. military spokesman tells Fox the Taliban attack is now over, and once again, the Taliban failed to take a city center. At the Pentagon, Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Look at what they did with the Clinton email investigation. The FBI agent in charge of the Clinton email investigation hated Trump, liked Clinton. Nothing's happened. The FISA warrant came from a document prepared by somebody on the Democratic Party's payroll.
And what we're also not talking about is, why don't we talk about the cost of reduced productivity because of people who need to go on disability, because of people who are not able to participate in our economy, because they don't have access to the health care that they need.
The NFL's preseason kicked into high gear last night, and a number of players renewed their protests during the national anthem. Their actions included taking a knee or raising a fist. The players' union and the league agreed to hold off on enforcing some new rules while the two sides worked out a resolution.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome to the program. It's good to be with you. It's a wonderful Friday. Could be a good news Friday. I don't know. I've got a Goodyear blimp flying out. It's not actually over my house. It's near where we're broadcasting from right now. The PGA World Tour, the golf tournament, is in St. Louis, and I can see the blimp, like literally just step outside our back door by the kitchen, and there it is. And what's so funny about it is that it looks huge. Now, obviously a blimp is huge, right? But it looks even bigger just kind of hanging there, and it's surprisingly nimble. Last night, when it was turning around, I guess, to make its flight back to wherever it's going to land, it turned in literally less than 60 seconds. It completely did a 180-degree turn and started moving away. So I guess the thought that we have that blimps are slow and unwieldy, that's no longer technologically accurate. So it's really cool to have that going on. And there are golfing superstars in the area. I'm not a golf person, but it is kind of cool to see the posts about St. Louis and the influx of activity that has occurred because of that. Lots of cars, lots of Lyft drivers getting a lot of work right now. Of course, the taxi cabs are running. And then the hotels are packed to the brimming with people who traveled here to watch the tour. And some of my friends who are really into golf, who I follow on Instagram, are posting pictures. They're literally like a stone's throw away from Tiger Woods and some of the other golfing superstars. But I just think it's cool that I get to see the blimp from where I live. And you can see it from all over. I was actually like 12 miles south of here, and you can see it from there as well. So I think we're all enjoying that kind of side effect of them being in town. So welcome to the show. I'm Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. For those who are looking for the podcast of the show, you can find that at urbanfamilytalk.com/Stacy. You can also find the podcast at afr.net. Just click on the podcast link there, and the show is in amongst the others on the network. You can click the drop down, and you're going to find the programs from this week, since we started broadcasting on AFR as well. I want to say huge thanks to everyone who's been reaching out with words of encouragement and positivity. I appreciate it. And I'm really, really honored and glad to be here, and so excited about today's show as well. We're going to talk about what's going on at the FBI. It's kind of weird. And then who is going to pay for all the free stuff that the Democratic Socialists are promising? Because they're promising a lot. I mean, it's almost as if they've got some magic unicorn that they can rub and things will happen. I'm pretty sure unicorns don't exist, but somehow they're planning on giving a whole lot of free stuff to Americans if they can ever get power. So we'll talk about that. And then we have Amy Kremer. She's a co-founder and co-chair of Women for Trump. She's going to come on. And then in hour 2, we're going to be speaking with Charles Lehman. I'm excited to speak to him. It's going to be an interesting interview. He's a staff writer for the award-winning Washington Free Beacon. And so he's on top of all of the good news. And in fact, we're going to talk about this proposal by Senator Marco Rubio for family leave. Now, I don't know where Charles Lehman comes down on this, but I absolutely do not want to see the government undertake yet another program. I'm so tired of the government taking programs over, and then they never end, they never cease, they never accomplish their intended purpose. The unintended consequences are always worse than the actual what they plan to give you. And it's just more of taxpayer dollars that are going to be wasted on this boondoggle. And of course, I'm in a family. I'm a woman. I've had children before. I took maternity leave with our oldest child before we made the decision as a family for me to stay home full time as a stay-at-home mom. And that was a difficult choice for us financially. And my husband did not have huge amounts of family leave. He took vacation for 2 weeks to stay home with me and the baby, and then he went back to work. There was no family leave. This was even before they would allow you to convert some of your sick leave into days that you could stay home with a new baby and things like that. Policies have been updated since then. I think this is in the purview of, corporations, businesses, but we'll discuss more of that later. So right now I want to talk about what's going on at the FBI. Now, let's be perfectly, I think that this entire investigation, if it had turned anything up, it would be of interest to me, but I'm just so over it. I'm so past it. I'm so exhausted by it. In fact, it's kind of like, I liken the level of exhaustion I have with this whole Russia investigation to how Donald Trump must be feeling with Omarosa rearing her head again. And that's speaking as someone who we've had Omarosa Manigault on this program twice. Both times she was a great interview. Both times she was still working for the Trump campaign or the Trump administration. She was calling in from the White House, and it was fantastic to speak to her. And she offered perspective, and it was great. But you know how you can have a problem and that problem just won't go away? Like it's a problem that just keeps coming back every time you think you've got it beat, every time you think you've figured it out, every time you think you've compromised or done whatever you need to do, it comes back again. That's what she's like. First of all, and I say problem because she had this friendship with Donald Trump. She had a lot of benefits from being his friend. Business opportunities, television opportunities, things that she wouldn't have had she never been an apprentice, had she never made a name for herself as kind of a disturber of the peace. And now here she is, after being given the opportunity to work in the White House as a liaison to a particular community that really the president needed outreach in that area. She didn't do a good job. And I'm not saying that because I'm on her side or I'm against her, but she was let go. Now she's no longer with the White House, and she's written a book. And it turns out she was a betrayer of the worst order, someone who would record you and not let you know that you were being recorded so they could then play those recordings for other people and use those recordings as leverage to maybe make money or to do something, it's not on the up and up. It's not above board. And so I've never been a hater of Omarosa. I've never been, a huge fan per se. I've just viewed her the way you would view any person who her public life was based upon her appearance on The Apprentice and then subsequent television programs. But since being let go from the White House, I feel like there's been a real, it's a negative. And there's a certain level of loyalty that the kind of opportunities that President Trump offered to her should have gotten him. I don't mean loyalty for illegal acts or immoral acts. I mean loyalty of the type that if you disagree, if you were let go, if you left of your own volition, at some point you have to sit down at the night and, in your own private thoughts and say, wow, I've really benefited a lot from this friendship. And even though it's not going the way I would like it to go now, I'm going to hold my peace. And I'm not saying that from like imaginary world, like what I think that might feel like. I'm saying that as a person who I've actually been through that, where a friendship doesn't end the way you would have hoped it would have. Maybe you didn't hope it would end at all. I know that was in my case, but in the end, when you tally up what's the proper way of going about moving forward, it's not to downgrade or to demote that other person. And we're talking about the president of the United States, who still has a lot of power and influence, and she's kind of burning her bridges as she goes. She's running across the bridge and burning it as if to say she'll never, ever need anything from anyone in the Trump orbit again. And it may be that she won't. But this is not the way you go about professionally exiting a relationship. And the book itself, she got an advance for it. She's going to make money off of it, but at what cost? So it's kind of disgusting. So we're talking now about Lindsey Graham. You got Senator Lindsey Graham. He's on Fox News. And he's talking about, there's some double standarding going on, which, I mean, what day is it? What year is it? Where are we? The double standards abound between the left and people on the right, and how people from those two different organizations or sides are treated. It's not fair that the FBI felt it necessary to warn individuals who were involved in people who might be under investigation, but they never did the same thing for Donald Trump. And Lindsey Graham brings this up, and I have to say, I'm glad he did it on Fox News, but he should have the opportunity to make the same statement on CNN and MSNBC and all of the other alphabet soup, cable and local and national news networks. Everyone should have this point made to them because it is fair. The FBI is not supposed to be a partisan organization. And if they are aware that someone who's under investigation or might be communicating with bad actors from another country or operating in a way that could be considered espionage, which is treason, by the way, then they should have let the Trump campaign know, hey, you've hired Paul Manafort. He's under investigation. Or the U.S. government just wants your campaign to know that you should be advised about having interactions or employment relationships with these individuals. But they didn't. So let's listen to Lindsey Graham make this great point, and then we'll there's some more to unpack. So let's get to that first.
One of the things that we didn't talk about, I didn't know about it until yesterday. Apparently, about 5 years ago, the FBI told Dianne Feinstein one of her employees may be an agent of the Chinese government. That was the right thing to do, and she fired them. I'm going to send a letter to Director Wray next week and ask him, what is the policy? Why didn't you tell President Trump that you had concerns about Carter Page? Is there a double standard here? If this was a counterintelligence investigation, not a criminal investigation, the FBI should have told President Trump they had concerns about Papadopoulos and Page. Why didn't they do for Trump what they did for Feinstein?
Yeah, I want to step back just a second to Dianne Feinstein. The senator was made aware. She then went on ahead and fired this spy.
Right.
And now you're sending a letter to Christopher Wray. Are you feeling like that needs more investigation right now?
You better believe it.
Okay, what do you want him to do exactly? And do we need to step back even further?
Sure.
Yeah, and take a look at anybody else?
I'm saying, what the is going on at the FBI? Why do you tell a Democrat when they hire somebody connected to China? It could happen to anybody's office.
Right.
When the FBI finds out that somebody's working for us, may have connections to a foreign government, they should tell us, and Dianne Feinstein acted responsibly. When it comes to the Trump campaign, why didn't they tell him about Papadopoulos or Carter Page? And at the end of the day, what has Carter Page done wrong?
Senator,
He's still walking around a free man.
When I said step back, Paul Manafort is on trial right now. Why didn't the FBI discuss Paul Manafort with the Trump campaign in more detail? So, that's what I mean. How far back do we need to go?
So that's Harris Faulkner on Fox News, and she makes an excellent point. For everyone who's under investigation, where the investigation precluded the target's relationship with the Trump campaign, the question is a good one. And so for people who are out there beating this drum, they're suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, and all they want to do is talk about how horrible the president is and how he's a Russian agent and how he's been co-opted by the Russians since 1987 and all of this ludicrous garbage that is making its way into op-eds and is finding its way like the tentacles of a horrible octopus into the hearts and minds of Americans who are unsuspecting that the news media might actually have a serious agenda against this president. And what we're seeing is it's like something that can't be stopped. Even as more and more facts unfold and are presented in piecemeal, mind you, because it's not the FBI that's sharing this information. It's people who have access to the information through their elected roles like Lindsey Graham and Devin Nunes and others. And they're starting to share with us exactly what's going on. First of all, we should all be outraged. Regardless of what party you are affiliated with, you should be outraged to see the United States government, which is our employee, exacting these kinds of double standards on people that they like and people that they don't like. And no, I'm not impugning the entire FBI. Yes, I know there are fantastic agents out there doing work and they're impartial and they are above reproach. But we're talking about the leadership who they could let Dianne Feinstein know she had a spy, an actual spy in her midst, but they couldn't tell candidate Trump because the Obama administration didn't want them to. Hope and change? Transformation? Looks like we got it, only it's not what we wanted. At least not for me. And I pay taxes too. We'll be right back with more Stacey on the Right after this.
You know, people often ask me, Tim, what's your favorite part of the Holy Land Tour? I've been leading Holy Land Tours for many years now. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, I learned how to lead these Israel tours from my dad, who started doing them in the 60s. And then he taught me in the 80s and 90s. And now my wife Allison and I lead these tours annually to Israel. And we love going because we love seeing people's eyes when they see things such as the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River and the Garden Tomb and the Wailing Wall. See all these things for the first time and maybe the last time in many folks' lives, because this is a bucket list trip. We're going to be going in March. If you want a brochure sent to your mailbox, give us a call at 800-FAMILIES, 800-FAMILIES, option 5. And we'll send you a brochure. If you want to go to the website, everything's there. twholyland.com. twholyland.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. I grew up with a kid who was a good student, came from a great family, and was an outstanding athlete. But he had a problem. He had a stubborn, rebellious streak in him, and the older he got, the more obstinate, even defiant he became. His behavior became so destructive, he was kicked out of school, and hardly anybody wanted to hang around him. Today, he is experiencing the outcome of his bad choices. He is in prison, serving a life sentence. Listen to 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verses 11 and 12 and 15 through 17. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord his God. He did not humble himself before Jeremiah the prophet, who spoke for the Lord. Now verse 15. And the Lord, the God of their fathers, sent word to them again and again by his messengers, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. For they continually mocked the messengers of God, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people, until there was no remedy. Therefore he brought up against them the king of the Chaldeans, who slew their young men with the sword in the house of the sanctuary, and had no compassion on the young man or virgin or old man or infirmed. He gave them into his hand. Hardly anything else needs to be said. God does not play with our rebellion. Here's what I want you to remember today. If you're rebelling against God in any way, I want to plead with you. Turn away from your pride and self-centeredness. Please listen and submit to God. Soften your heart. You don't want to end up where you're surely headed.
Legacy Moment is a production of Moody Radio, a ministry of Moody Global Ministries.
You can download episodes of Stacey on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey there. Welcome back to the show. Happy Friday to you. I hope you're enjoying the slide on into the weekend. Big plans, I'm sure, all around. We are certainly going to be pretty busy this weekend, dropping off our oldest child at college for the first time. Whoa, yeah, that's happening. I also want to welcome listeners into the last day of Truth for Youth Week It's truthforyouth.com. That's where you can request your free Truth for Youth Bible. And you can also call during the hours of 8 and 4:30, and you can request your Bible via the telephone line, which is live right now for you, 800-733-4737. It's 800-733-4737. Or you can go any time of day, 24/7, to truthforyouth.com and request your free Truth for Youth Bible. Or you can also order any number of them for just $2 a piece, which is totally, like, that's an awesome deal. Great book. I have to say it's kid approved here at the Washington House. And we're really excited to get to have the interviews we had this week, which you can find at the podcast page, as was mentioned before. So right now, I want to welcome a frequent guest of the show and good friend, Amy Kremer. She's a co-founder and co-chair of Women for Trump. Amy, thanks for coming on today.
Hey, Stacey. So great to be on with you.
It's good to talk to you. So much going on. I mean, and I know you're up on everything. And Amy, we could talk for like hours, but can you just comment really quickly? Just some pompous blowhard judge has threatened to hold the Attorney General of the United States in contempt. This judge must run a fiefdom or a kingdom of the United States of America, as opposed to being simply a judge. His name's U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan. He was appointed by President Bill Clinton in 1994. He's threatening to hold AG Jeff Sessions in contempt of court if U.S. officials don't immediately bring 2 illegal aliens back to the United States, a mom and a daughter, who were just deported. Yeah,
I mean, when I heard this story, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It's that activism, being a judicial activist from the bench, trying to make laws, take control of things. It's exactly what we don't need. We don't need judicial activists anywhere in this country. But you know what? What gives me hope across the nation, Stacey, is that it's one of the untold stories of President Trump's administration. The number of judicial appointments he has made on lower courts all across the country, and he's appointing constitutional, judicial. I can't even say it. I'm tongue-tied. Sorry.
No. I know where you're going.
He's appointing judges that actually adhere to the Constitution, and that's exactly what we want, because it will stop this nonsense of these judges being activists from the bench and trying to legislate and make law and run the country the way that they want to.
You know, I got to say, that is one of the bright spots, and one of the things that a lot of the news media are refusing to report on, because he's actually broken records with the number of judges that he's been able to put onto the bench.
Yes.
And I would normally not be excited about the government breaking records in any area, but in this particular area, this is really good, right? Because let's look at it this way, Amy. The same kind of activism that we're seeing on the left, we don't want to see activism on the right or the left. We just want jurists to interpret the law according to the Constitution and to rule on the constitutionality of the lower court rulings. We don't want them acting as if, I mean, what judge in this country is empowered to order the Attorney General of the United States to do anything? That sounds completely outside of their purview.
It's insanity. I mean, and I guess they've already been returned. Now, I will say, I heard somebody say this morning that the reason the judge did this was because they actually I guess there was a follow-up hearing, and the DOJ or ICE, whoever, deported them before the follow-up hearing, and so he was mad, and that's the reason they did it. I mean, I don't care why he did it. The point is, I mean, they came here illegally. They're breaking our laws to begin with, and now we're going to spend American dollars to bring them back. I mean, it's just insanity all the way around. Don't threaten to hold them in contempt if they're not returned to this country. I mean, it's really unbelievable, and we need to shut this down. So
it's as if they have more rights than we do. Because I want that judge to maybe order an airline to fly you somewhere, Amy, that you need to go. You know, maybe he could come over here and help us get some plane tickets to somewhere we need to go. We are actually taxpayers. We are actually, we have rights under the Constitution as citizens. These other people are coming here. They want to be citizens, but as of right now, they don't have the same rights that we enjoy. And I think it's crazy that we're seeing this, like that people are going to begin to think this is normal. All I have to do is get before a judge who's friendly, and he'll tell the Trump administration what they have to do. That is not constitutional.
Right. And, I mean, look, this is the greatest nation on earth. I had somebody say to me yesterday, I do think we need to build a wall, but I don't think it should be so hard to become a U.S. citizen. And I looked at him and I said, have you ever been outside of this country? And he shook his head no to me. And I said, that's exactly why you feel that way. The thing about it is, it should be hard to become a U.S. citizen. You know, we hear about these people coming here because they're trying to escape gang violence or domestic violence or political persecution or whatever. Well, this is the thing, Stacey. If it were so easy to come here and we have no borders and you can just come when you want because of whatever reason you want, all that stuff is going to come here. Where are we going to go then? I mean, when everybody comes here, where all this gang violence and everything is, I mean, I'm sure you've heard about the beheading of the killing of the grandmother, the beheading of her granddaughter down in Louisiana by gang members. I mean, these people, this is horrific stuff that is happening across the country, and these people are coming across our borders willy-nilly as they want to. We need to shut it down, and it needs to be, I mean, you need to go through the process, follow the law to become a U.S. citizen. If you're deserving of it, if you go through it the right way, then it's great. Melania Trump's parents actually became U.S. citizens yesterday, but you know what? They did it the right way. They followed the law, and they started the process before Donald Trump ever ran for president. I mean, that's what people need to do. You can come here, but you have to do it the right way.
I love the fact that you made that point because leftist news media wants to make a big deal out of the fact that Melania Trump's parents have just become citizens, and it's not a big deal. Like, it's not a big deal for people to pay tens of thousands of dollars and travel in and out of the country when they're told to, you know, update their green card, their permanent resident status, learn the language, pass the exam, and then pay more money and wait even more years and then finally get the word, now you can become a citizen. This is happening separate and apart from the fact that her husband ran for the presidency. This has nothing to do with Donald Trump. And the fact that they're making it an issue just goes to show you how idiotic this entire discussion is. And I want to make just one last point before we move on to the next subject about this. And that is the same people who don't think Melania Trump's parents should be citizens and they've been living here and abiding by the law as permanent residents are the same ones who think that whoever that was that got deported and is now re-imported should automatically become a citizen. No questions asked whether she's a criminal or not, whether she's really needing asylum or not. It's just no questions asked. If you're from a foreign country, especially to the south of our border, you deserve to be here.
Exactly. I mean, the hypocrisy is unbelievable. It really is unbelievable, the hypocrisy from the left. And it's not just this issue. It's across the board.
It is. Well, so let's talk a little bit about this. So the Manafort trial's going on, and it's had some really interesting kind of dramatic moments where the judge seems to not like the prosecutor, and he's been, you know, making him cry and stuff. And I actually think that's pretty sad because they're all grown men. And now you have Lindsey Graham coming out saying that, you know, no one ever warned him. No one in the FBI ever warned the Trump administration or the Trump campaign that they were hiring people who were under investigation or who were suspected of kind of illegal relationships with oligarchs in Russia, that type of thing.
Right.
So I know we don't have the same people in charge. The person who really needs to be asked is Jim Comey, not the one who's in charge now, or Andrew McCabe. It shouldn't be that the person who's in charge of the FBI now gets raked over the coals for something that happened a few years ago. But how do we prevent this from happening again, where the government's basically been weaponized to act against people based on their political affiliation?
Well, I mean, Stacey, this isn't the first time we've seen it. We actually saw it, you know, with the IRS back during the Obama administration when the IRS went after the Tea Party movement. What we need, the only way I know that we stop this from happening in the future is to drain the swamp. Jim Comey, Andrew McCabe, they are swamp monsters. They are creatures of the swamp. And it's not just in elected office are creatures of the swamp. It's the bureaucrats, too. And it's been one of my biggest disappointments is and I understand. I think I understand why, but the rate at this investigation has dragged on, and the fact that there hasn't been a whole lot done. I mean, it is infuriating to me that you are arresting a Republican for insider trading, which that's fine. I mean, I totally understand that, but it's infuriating that they did arrest Chris Collins in New York for insider trading, which happened a year ago, but yet Hillary Clinton, Andrew McCabe, Jim Comey, and all these people are still walking free after breaking all these laws. Hillary Clinton specifically. They've done nothing to her. So the hypocrisy there is unbelievable. We have to do something about this because Americans have lost faith in the DOJ and the FBI across the country. It's a serious issue. The trust issue is a serious issue. You want to believe that when the FBI is on an investigation or doing something, that you can trust them, that they're doing what is right and what's best. And the American people don't feel that way right now. And the big question is, where is Jeff Sessions and what is going on? That's the biggest question. And people want something done about it. Now, I understand that President Trump, and I don't mean to go on, but I understand that President Trump, there's an investigation going on. I'm asked all the time, do you think that he should fire Mueller and fire Rosenstein, fire Mueller and end the investigation? And my answer is no. I think the investigation needs to conclude because they're going to come up with it. There's no collusion. Otherwise, we will never hear the end of it. But so I think the president is in a pickle on this because he wants it to end too. But it's just we need it to end, and we need to get to the bottom of this. And that's the only way we're going to stop this from ever happening again is get rid of these bureaucrats, these deep dwellers that are in the swamp.
I agree. And so before we let you go, and thank you so much for joining the show today. If you're just joining in, I'm speaking with Amy Kremer. She's the co-founder and co-chair of Women for Trump. Talk to us just a little bit about what Women for Trump are doing as we go into the midterms.
Well, thanks for having me on. And so, we are focused on keeping the House and the Senate. If we don't keep the House, the Democrats are going to take over. They're going to end all these investigations that are looking into the FBI, the DOJ, and the Russia stuff, and they're going to impeach the president, which will mean we will never get anything else passed in his agenda. I believe it would cause him to be a one-term president. I don't want that to happen. So we're focused on keeping the House and the Senate and going after some of these liberal Democrat women that just because you're a woman doesn't mean your policies are best for women. The left is so good at playing identity politics, and women are smart. We vote on issues. We vote according to economics and to national security. And so that's what we're out there doing is doing events across the country. We're working on having a women's conference to empower other women in Washington in October, and we'll be getting more information out about that. But we want people to understand that we do have a choice, and just because the left is having a meltdown and having their Trump derangement syndrome doesn't mean that we have to stay in our homes and not do anything. We need to be bold and go out there and talk about why we support this president and why he's doing great things in his administration, and just be bold about it and work our butts off through November.
Well, I again appreciate your time and the work that you're doing, and thank you for coming on today, especially the expert analysis on what's going on with the FBI, and we just have to keep keep praying about this and also keep working to hold our elected officials accountable for the actions that they're taking, and that includes managing our government agencies, which we need better people in leadership of these huge, very powerful law enforcement organizations. Amy Kremer, co-founder and co-chair of Women for Trump. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Stacey. Have a great weekend.
You too.
And thanks for what you do.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. So it's just astounding to me that this is what's going on. After the stories from this week, when we talked about so you've got this big, this is a huge story for a judge to order someone who's been deported to be brought back into the country. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy to have those people. First of all, how much money are we spending for those plane tickets? And again, why? Why would we even entertain that? Do you know how many people are here illegally? Millions of people are in the country illegally. We should be moving through the list, deporting anyone who doesn't have a valid reason to be here If you entered the country illegally, you do not have a valid reason to be here, we should be deporting them. Is that racial? Is that bigotry? No. Don't try to play that with me. I'm not in any way, shape, or form afraid of immigrants. So you can't say I'm xenophobic. I'm not afraid of immigrants coming here or immigration. And I've lived abroad. I've been all over the world, and I don't have a problem with foreigners. In fact, I think they're awesome. But I also believe that this country has every right to decide who can and cannot come into this country and why. And we should be doing that according to what our laws say, not according to how people feel. This isn't about feelings. It's about what's lawful. All right. When we get back, we're going to be talking about Representative Scalise. He's had yet another attempt on his life. We're going to talk about that and the ridiculousness of it all. And we'll take some calls if you'd like. 866-963-2037. Stay there.
I had a conversation with my daughter about making mistakes and not getting this Christian walk right. I had to explain to her that none of us are perfect, but we are all striving for perfection. Then I was listening to a song by 10th Avenue North called You Are More. The song really explained what I shared with her and reminded me that the enemy would like nothing more than to use the mistakes and things you've gotten wrong against you. But because of Christ, you are more than your mistakes. You are more and bigger than your fears. You are so much more than the choices you've made. And God's love for you never wanes. It never decreases. It never ceases to exist. Today, no matter what you've done or how bad you think it is, repent and rest in the forgiveness and love of the Father. Extend to yourself the same passion and grace that the Father extends. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
There was a time where I was in the middle of doing something, and the Lord just really impressed upon my heart that I needed to buy my wife some flowers. I hadn't thought about it, hadn't done it in a while. And I walk into the door of our little small apartment, and I have the flowers in my hand, and my wife's eyes connect with mine. Her eyes just well up with tears. And I immediately start thinking, what's wrong? What happened? What's going on? And she said, Abe, I've been wanting some flowers, but I know what our financial situation is, and I didn't want to be an additional burden on you because I know things are tight now. And man, it was just a moment where my wife and I just fall more deeply in love with the Lord and more deeply in love with one another.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekday afternoons at 5 Central on Urban Family Talk.
By relying on Him. Oh, God. Oh, Lord, I thank you. I thank you, Lord. I thank you, Lord.
Bullet Points.
I'm Steve Rappaport. In Titusville, Florida, a case of good guy with a gun stopping a bad guy with a gun. It happened at a back-to-school event.
That's gunfire. And I turned around, and I see a dude with a 9mm.
Dwight Harvey was recording it. It could have been a deadly rampage, but a man in the crowd pulled out his licensed handgun and quickly put a stop to the shooting. No one was hurt, except for the wounded gunman. In Castle Rock, Colorado, a warning to gun thieves: don't try it at DCF Gun Store. Thanks to just upgraded security cameras, they caught the guy who snatched a handgun off the counter.
It was great that we did that because that's what allowed us to get those clear pictures, get them out right away, get them over to the PD.
Store owner Josh Barton, the would-be gun thief, in custody. New York State hunters' licenses are now on sale, valid for a year beginning September 1st. And on the ballot in North Carolina this November, a proposed state amendment that would protect hunting and fishing as a constitutional right. And those are your bullet points.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Yes, it's Friday, and it's a great day to be alive, a great day to be able to look out and see all of God's beautiful blessings just overflowing in America, and then also a great day to be an American. Yeah, it's Friday, so let's take some calls. I love chatting with callers. Now let's see if I can work this machinery correctly. I think I'm supposed to click on the check mark. No. The number. Do I click on that? No. I have no idea how to take these things. Someone, let's go to Keith in Michigan. Oh, perfect. Okay. I'll figure it out, you guys.
Hi.
I need more training.
Yeah,
Hi, Keith. Happy Friday.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. Hey, a couple of things. There's one, I wanted to comment about something my grandfather, he was a farmer during the Depression age in Michigan. And he was told by FDR, I'll pay you for not working. And he said, that's un-American. That's kind of stupid. And so he continued to farm. He was like, that's un-American. Get paid for not working. So so I wanted to make that comment. But the other thing about immigration, I've worked in some international companies, and there was one guy here in Michigan he was Pakistani by birth, but he was American as went through the whole immigration part, went through the whole series, got naturalized, and became an American citizen. I said, oh, so you're a Pakistani American, hyphenated? He said, no, I'm an American. I'm not Pakistani American. I am American. And I make sure that my boys, his children, understand we are Americans. So there are immigrants who do take pride in the fact that they are Americans and strictly American.
You know what? I got to say, Keith, thank you for sharing that story about your family. And, I love hearing things like that because it kind of connects us historically to the strength, of kind of the American spirit, because we are very different people from other nations. And so thank you for sharing that. And I want to say, I believe in my heart that the majority of people who are legal immigrants feel as you have just shared about your coworker. I believe that. I think the ones that you see on MSNBC and CNN who are activists and, they wear the Mexico T-shirt and they're always flying the Mexican flag, I think they're the minority. I think, you know how it is with stereotypes where the loudest, worst behavior becomes the stereotype for anyone who looks like that. And so you're constantly fighting that stereotype. And I believe legal immigrants fight that stereotype the same way that, blacks fight the stereotype that all black people are criminals or all, black moms are, unwed mothers. It's a significant number, but there are certainly millions of women like myself who are married moms. And so there's a lot of that going on where the media takes the squeaky wheel, the most interesting story, and they magnify that. And then everyone else is kind of the silent majority, as it is with what turned out to be what swept Donald Trump into office, which is people who just wanted someone to care about Americans first. So I believe that. What do you think? Do you think there are more immigrants that are the other way, where they're constantly being hyphenated, or? We don't have him anymore. I'm just talking to him, and so I hope he heard that. But I do believe that that most immigrants are the ones who are definitely pro-America. They're glad to be Americans. They're really grateful to be here. Let's see. Oh, we have time. Let's go to George in Missouri. Hey, thanks for calling, Stacy on the right.
Hey, Stacy, thanks for doing what you're doing. And I got a better way, I think, for the immigration system. Instead of having the visa lottery deal, we have anybody that wants to come to the country fills out an application, just like a job application, sends it to the Department of Immigration, and then they ask them, what are you bringing to the table? And that seems to me a better way of having them fill out an application. And don't call us, we'll call you.
Right, don't show up.
and how do you like us now?
I like it. George, anything, so that sounds similar to the merit-based immigration plan that the president has. So I'm all for a plan that, of course, we want to still have immigration. I'm not against immigration, but I do think we're doing it wrong, and the president has explained why, and I think he should continue to explain why and win over the American people. Thanks for calling the show today. Let's take one more. We got Mary in Kansas. Thank you so much for calling into the show.
Thank you. The group ICE that helps us keep the immigration under control at the wall and other states, the one in Washington that's been having the problem with the protesters out front, really getting violent with other people on the outside area, like they threaten a family to shut down their wagon where they made sandwiches and stuff. I wish President Trump, if the people, the police force there are not going to make them be in control, President Trump would send guards then from a National Guard or something to patrol the out front like they do with Federal Bank sometimes in Memphis. So I was just wondering why he doesn't do that, because pretty soon somebody is going to get killed or hurt. And I just think these protesters that are doing it illegally or not lawfully should have to be arrested. And if the locals won't do it, then I want him to send in a federal group and do the job that the locals don't want to do. Thank you, and I hope and pray your show is successful.
Oh, thank you, Mary. I appreciate that. You have a great question there. So I got to say, when I saw the news about that protest, I was kind of appalled that, first of all, the police didn't, and we talked about it here on the show, that the police didn't respond, and second of all, that they don't have any like secondary mechanism for protection. Now, I would think that they would maybe be looking into that, getting some private security so that it, if this were to ever happen again, which it probably will in a liberal state like that, where they're really upset and in their feelings about immigration, that would probably, it may happen again. They do need some private security. I just feel like, and I've heard some other people saying this, and I want to join the calls, for anyone who has connections to the president beyond, me being on the media list. I encourage and I ask as a service to the American people that you are the commander in chief of, that President Trump, will you please do an address to the nation and completely share the facts that I know them, I've seen them, I've read them, I've shared them on the show. This listening audience, tip of the spear. You guys know what's going on. But there are millions of Americans out there who they've never listened to this show and they watch mainstream news and they believe this is about putting kids in cages and separating them from their families, when the truth is this is about protecting our border. And I mean the kinds of addresses that he does. I don't know if you've ever heard the weekly address that the president does. Every president does them. He's very, very direct in those addresses. He just lists the facts. There's not a lot of, conversation. There's just, hey, this is the subject this weekend. And he addresses immigration in those weekly addresses quite a bit. But I mean one where he says, I'm going to address the nation. And the cable news outlets are either forced to ignore it and not cover it and have multiple tens of millions of Americans watching C-SPAN, or they cover it because they want the eyeballs, because they want the ratings, because they want the advertising. I think they're going to do number two. The president addresses the nation and he shares every single metric, number, the crime statistics, everything without any additional conversation. So, and I love the rallies. I think the president is really in rare form sometimes when he gets behind the microphone and he just speaks off the cuff. But what we need is not off the cuff conversation here. We need the president to address immigration and the problem at our border. And if you think that maybe you just tune into the show, or maybe you're one of the listeners who, I do appreciate you as well. You're a liberal and you listen in anyway, and you disagree. I have to say, if you haven't listened to, and I say listen to because it's even worse listening to it than it is reading it, the book Adios America by Ann Coulter. She gets such a bad rap, but there's a reason why she's a best-selling author. The woman gets the research done and then she writes the book. Every single book of hers is research-based, and Adios America is no different. And I know there are terms and there are things she describes in the book. She's so no-nonsense and so blunt that it's very offensive to people who are kind of, not able to take the truth. But the fact is, the best medicine is the truth. If you've ever been in a situation where you want to know what the problem is, and someone starts, well, the thing is, you might feel this. No, you don't want to hear about what you might feel. You want to hear what the problem is because you want to solve it. And if it's really important to you, your family, your wealth, your bottom line, your health, you're going to think to yourself, please don't sugarcoat this. Tell me what the problem is so I can fix it. And our immigration problem is of the utmost seriousness. And when I hear people call in like Mary and Keith, so many, these are great Americans, just like most Americans are great Americans. They're calling in and they're concerned because they're aware of what these numbers are. And we're talking about horrible numbers. I gave them on the program. In fact, this was last week, and I want to grab this for you real quick as we're closing out this segment. This is what we're talking about right here. These are numbers from the Department of Homeland Security, Enforcement and Removal Operations Division, ERO. They arrested more than 127,000 illegal aliens with criminal convictions in the fiscal year 2017. 127,000. Those 127,000 had charges or convictions for the following offenses. 76,000 of them were dangerous drug offenses. 48,000 were assault offenses. 11,000 were weapons offenses. 2,000 were kidnappings. Can you imagine what? This is not Honduras. This is not some pit. This is America. And we're importing people, letting them come in, and they're kidnapping Americans. And 1,800 homicides. 1,800 Americans who would be alive if not for our open border. I said it then, and I'll say it again. Someone in government should be held accountable for these deaths, kidnappings, and sexual assaults. 5,000 people who would have been completely unmolested had it not been for the fact that we have a political party that advocates for open borders, and we have a government that has had its hands tied, that is not operating under the law that currently exists, laws that prohibit individuals from coming into this country illegally. That's not xenophobia. That's not partisan politics. It's not rhetoric. It's the truth. We deserve to have our borders sealed and to have Americans protected. And so for people who would, well, you just don't want to talk about the separations. I wonder if your child or spouse was kidnapped, if liberals would care about you being separated from your child or your spouse or whichever family member you have that's been kidnapped. Does your family matter as much as illegal immigrant families? What about the homicides? If you've lost a family member to a homicide by an illegal immigrant, does Rachel Maddow cry for your family separation? Is it a low point for whoever feels like this is a total low point for them? I mean, you know, an apple is an apple. A feeling is a feeling. Do you have feelings for all Americans, or is it just for the people who are here illegally that you feel for? 76,000 dangerous drug offenses. If your child is strung out on drugs that they got from an illegal alien, I wonder, does anyone cry for you when your child is in rehab and they're separated from you, spending 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 90 days in these facilities trying to get extricated, that drug that they're addicted to, trying to get them broken off of that. And that's what we're talking about here. So it's not about fear, unless you want to be honest. Most Americans who are for sealing the border, they're afraid of something. It's not illegal immigrants. It's not people from other countries. They're afraid of dangerous drug offenses, assault offenses, weapons offenses, sexual assaults, kidnappings, and homicides. That's what Americans are afraid of. So if there's a criminal phobia or a crime phobia, then I'm sure you'll find millions of Americans who would rightly raise their hands and say, I have that phobia. I have a phobia of having someone who isn't a citizen of this country coming here and lopping off someone's head in my family because they can, because they're a part of MS-13. That is the real rubber meeting the road here. And so for anyone who is really concerned about family separation, excuse me, first I want to hear you talk about the family separations that have occurred because of the 127,000 criminal aliens who were in this country doing crime in fiscal year 2017. And then I want you to, before you say anything else, go get the government data on those for so far this year in fiscal year 18. Because there are numbers for that as well. As of the July 26, 2018 Joint Status Report, 1,820 of the 2,551 children aged 5 and above whose parents were identified were reunified with their parents. I would imagine that the 1,800 plus homicide cases, the parents of those people, were they adults or children, people who died, who were killed by illegal aliens, would give anything to have a judge order that their dead family member be reunited with them alive and whole as if this never happened. And until we can make that a reality, until you wave Obama's magic wand and make kids who've been killed by illegal aliens whole again and able to come back to their parents, do not mention family separations to me. That's hour one. We'll be back with hour two right after these messages, so you stay right there. OneNewsNow.com news is up next.
Urban Family Talk is that alternative radio network because we choose to infuse Jesus in everything we do.
We count it a blessing to be able to speak with integrity and to speak honestly on the issues.
Thank you for joining us, partnering with us, being a part of
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk.
Urban Family Talk, so that we can stand for the gospel.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Key. An FBI profiler says missing University of Iowa college student Molly Tibbetts likely went off in a car with someone she knew. Jeff Manasso has more.
Former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole doesn't believe that 20-year-old Molly Tibbetts was kidnapped. She thinks, based on reporting in the case, that the night she went missing, she likely left her boyfriend's home in a car with someone she knew and trusted. It's Molly's father, Rob's theory.
I'm a father who wants to know that his daughter is alive, and so I'm trying to think of logical scenarios where we can bring her home.
The FBI and Iowa Department of Investigation have been tight-lipped, though expected to give a weekly update on the search for Molly Tibbetts today. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
The day after President Trump held a roundtable on prison reform, one of the state leaders who was there talked about efforts to help inmates. Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant spoke to Fox and Friends.
You've got to make sure you have drug counseling there. So many, about 90% of those that are in prison now, incarcerated, 2 million across America, are there because of drug-related arrests. Almost 100% of the women in prison were related to drugs. So, we start there.
An immigration reform activist says all three branches of government have dropped the ball when it comes to DACA. Chad Groening has more.
Last week, U.S. District Judge John Bates ruled that the Trump administration must reinstate the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program, which was put in place by Barack Obama without congressional approval. Attorney General Jeff Sessions responded this week, calling the court ruling improper in one of a number of decisions in which courts have improperly used judicial power to steer, enjoin, modify, and direct executive policy. William Geen is president of Americans for Legal Immigration, PAC, or ALIPAC. He says the Supreme Court bears some responsibility.
In fact, when the Supreme Court saw DACA happen, which was clearly unconstitutional, clearly a violation of numerous existing immigration laws, it should have intercepted that and handled that immediately, but they've turned it down several times.
But Geen says President Trump doesn't have to listen to any of the judges who claim they have jurisdiction over DACA.
This isn't a law. This is not an executive order. This is a set of memos that Donald Trump could have ended on his first day, and he could end today by sending out another memo that says these prior memos from Obama creating DACA amnesty for illegals are no longer valid.
And Geen says Congress has also failed to act.
Our Congress is at fault. DACA, which was the DREAM Act legislation which failed, continues to unconstitutionally be the law of this land, despite the fact that the same legislation was defeated in Congress several times.
I'm Chad Groening.
Operation Rescue contends the situation at a North Carolina abortion clinic is proof that national statistics need to be reported on botched abortions.
In 2016, Diamond Williams had an abortion at the Carolina Center for Women in Charlotte and later died from complications after she was rushed to a hospital emergency room. Cheryl Sullinger of Operation Rescue did some investigating and found that the center changed its name to A Women's Choice of Charlotte 2 months after her death. But there's more.
We
received documents from the Charlotte, North Carolina Fire Department that indicated that there were 20 medical emergencies where a 911 call was placed from the Carolina Center for Women over the past few years. And these are 20 emergencies that we were previously not aware of.
Operation Rescue contends that should be a warning to women seeking an abortion in the Charlotte area. Obtaining that type of information is quite a struggle, but Solinger says it should not be.
We think also this information supports a call for some kind of standardized national abortion reporting, not just numbers of abortions, but numbers of complications as well.
At present, shoddy abortion clinics, of which there are many, are able to hide behind a curtain of secrecy, keeping the public unaware of abortion emergencies, information the public should have access to, especially women who are considering abortion. I'm Charlie Butts.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com, on Facebook and Twitter, and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pete.
Nothing can get done in the United States Senate for good unless we end the legislative filibuster. We're urging you today to call your senator and ask them to end the legislative filibuster so that we can defund Planned Parenthood, the largest abortion provider in America. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121. That's 202-224-3121, or go to afaaction.net.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Look at what they did with the Clinton email investigation. The FBI agent in charge of the Clinton email investigation hated Trump, liked Clinton. Nothing's happened. The FISA warrant came from a document prepared by somebody on the Democratic Party's payroll.
And what we're also not talking about is, why don't we talk about the cost of reduced productivity because of people who need to go on disability, because of people who are not able to participate in our economy, because they don't have access to the health care that they need.
The NFL's preseason kicked into high gear last night, and a number of players renewed their protests during the national anthem. Their actions included taking a knee or raising a fist. The players' union and the league agreed to hold off on enforcing some new rules while the two sides worked out a resolution.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome to the program. Thanks for being here today. We are moving on along, and I have breaking news straight from the White House in my inbox here. This is great news for those of us who want to see the Supreme Court fully operational during their session so that they can, rule on cases with a full bench. And this is for immediate release from the Committee on the Judiciary. Chairman of that committee is Chuck Grassley. Grassley has said that Kavanaugh's hearings will begin on September the 4th. This is straight out of Washington, D.C. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley today announced that the hearing for Judge Brett Kavanaugh to serve as an Associate Justice on the Supreme Court of the United States will begin on September 4th. Grassley expects the hearings to last 3 to 4 days. Opening statements by Judiciary Committee members and the nominee will occur on Tuesday, September 4th. The questioning of Judge Kavanaugh will begin on Wednesday, the 5th. Testimony by those who know Judge Kavanaugh the best, outside legal experts, and the American Bar Association is expected to follow. Now, there's a quote from Senator Grassley. He says, "As I said after his nomination, Judge Kavanaugh is one of the most respected jurists in the country and one of the most qualified nominees ever to be considered by the Senate for a seat on our highest court." He goes on to say, "My team has already reviewed every page of the over 4,800 pages of judicial opinions Judge Kavanaugh wrote, over 6,400 pages of opinions he joined, and more than 125,000 pages of records produced from his White House legal service, and over 17,000 pages in response to the most comprehensive questionnaire ever submitted to a nominee. He's a mainstream judge. He has a record of judicial independence and applying the law as it is written. He's met with dozens of senators who have nothing but positive things to say. At this current pace, we have plenty of time to review the rest of emails and other records that we will receive from President Bush and the National Archives. It is time for the American people to hear directly from Judge Kavanaugh at his public hearing." This is good news because it gives plenty of time for this to be wrapped up and the confirmation to be done before the midterms. And I think it's fantastic that they're actually moving to do this. as September 14th start date for the hearing is 57 days after the announcement of Judge Kavanaugh's nomination. And remember, we were told that it could take, a total of 120 to 140 days to complete. And that extends the timeline that was set for the committee's consideration of Justices Sonia Sotomayor, Kagan, and Gorsuch. Hearings for those nominees occurred 48 to 49 days after the president announced their nominations. So, interesting. Good news and interesting. So let's get back into, basically the show sheet. Let's get back to it. I want to first just highlight the fact that it's not Americans suffering from the violence of illegal immigrants coming into this country. And not all illegal immigrants are violent, but certainly even one act of violence by an illegal immigrant is too much, because the predicating law that was broken is entry into the country without proper, paperwork. So it's Representative Scalise, who was the victim of a vicious attack, he and others who were on that baseball field practicing for the congressional baseball game between the Democrats and the Republicans. He was gunned down. And if it wasn't for the Capitol Police, who were only there because a majority whip was in present, not all senators and representatives have security, they would have all died. And so here he is talking about his most recent death threat, an assassination attempt that he's received just last week.
There's no place for it in politics. I first want to thank, once again, our United States Capitol Police. They were very quick to act when my office received this threat. They sent the information on to Capitol Police. Capitol Police did research, found out that this man has had some real serious concerns, and it was hard to track him down because he was trying to use aliases, but ultimately they found him, and he's in custody, in federal custody, and hopefully he gets a serious sentence, because you can't allow this kind of threats and violence against people based on their political views.
So I'm hopeful that the person that they've now been able to apprehend him comes to justice as well. But I want to point out that for all of the talk about the war on women and the violence of the extreme right and all of that, these people have turned out to be leftists, Bernie Sanders supporters, et cetera, et cetera. A political ideology does not automatically make one violent or more prone to threatening or attempting assassination, but I don't see the media reporting accurately on what's occurring. In fact, the person who was just apprehended for insider trading was immediately identified as a Republican, while others, Menendez, remember Senator Bob Menendez, when he was brought up on all of those charges for, lots of different things that he was doing incorrectly, and the media never identified him as a Democrat. So if it doesn't have to be an identification made for Menendez because he's a Democrat, then why are we identifying this gentleman from New York who's elected and is also being tried for insider trading? Why? Either do it all or don't do any. So now let's pivot over to who's going to pay for everything. And here's a hint. It's you. If you don't think you're already paying enough for everything, because you are paying for everything as a taxpayer, you're paying for everything. You're paying for everything the federal government does. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is still out there dishing it as good as she can on behalf of Democratic Socialism. Now, we talked about a little bit yesterday on the show, $42.5 trillion after they've confiscated everything over $90,000. So anything that you earn or own over $90,000 every year, all of your wealth, all of your savings, everything that you've got over 90 grand would have to be confiscated by the federal government, and then they would still need more money after that because they'd get it all, and then you still have to make more for them to get more. And she still thinks this is a viable alternative for Americans, this democratic socialism. So here she is talking about Medicare for all and how if you have Medicare for all, you don't have to worry about funeral expenses. I know, try to hold in your guffaws.
Then you get into the partisan issue of money, which is, man, do you want to spend a lot of my tax money on these proposals that you and Bernie and others have? Medicare for all, college tuition, maybe even housing, that the Green New Deal that you have, it is all very expensive, especially on the single payer side, and that it gives people sticker shock, even in Bernie's home state. they got sticker shock. They couldn't get it done in his state because of how expensive it is. And that was an 11% increase in taxes, 9 to 11%. Even that was too much for people. How do you pay? How do you sell it?
So first of all, the thing that we need to realize is people talk about the sticker shock of Medicare for all. They do not talk about the sticker shock of the cost of our existing system.
Wow. So first of all, how many Americans are out there right now saying, yeah, I want the government to take more of my money so I don't have to worry about funeral expenses? I know there are families in America who are burdened by funeral expenses when a loved one passes away, and I'm not discounting that. But do we all need to give up everything but 90 grand? That's the value of your home. I want to be clear here. When they say every American keeps 90,000 so they can spend 42.5 trillion every year on giving everybody everything, they mean you keep 90 grand worth of assets, cash, etc. That's the value of your home, whatever. The rest of it is confiscated by the government. And that's just the first year. They also would have to add a value-added tax of 87%. So whatever you pay for your car or for your electrical service or for any service at all that you're paying for, a value-added tax of 87% would be added to that. 87% of the value of whatever you're getting, you'd have to pay that in addition in order to get it. Can you see how the entire U.S. economy would be immediately crippled? Everything would shut down. Black markets would spring up, and then you'd see the anarchy start. Food would not be traveling in air-conditioned, refrigerated trucks from place to place, and deliveries on Tuesdays and Thursdays for the grocery stores, and Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays and Saturdays for the Sam's Clubs and the big box. We're talking about the complete obliteration of everything as we know it right now. Just completely destroy it and just bring whatever's going on in Venezuela, the eating of the pets and everything, just bring that up here. She had more to say, though, because she's really convinced herself that she's right. It's Ocasio-Cortez, too.
I think at the end of the day, we see that this is not a pipe dream. Every other developed nation in the world does this. Why can't America? And that is the question that we need to ask. We have done these things before. We write unlimited blank checks for war. We just wrote a $2 trillion check for that tax cut, the GOP tax cut, and nobody asked those folks how are they going to pay for it. So my question is, why is it that our pockets are only empty when it comes to education and health care for our kids? Why are our pockets only empty when we talk about 100% renewable energy that is going to save this planet and allow our children to thrive? We only have empty pockets when it comes to the morally right things to do. But when it comes to tax cuts for billionaires and when it comes to unlimited war, we seem to be able to invent that money very easily. And to me, it belies a lack of moral priorities that people have right now, especially the Republican Party.
So my response to that is, and help me out here, is she not aware that the Republican tax cut is paying for itself? It's called economic growth. Economic growth pays for tax cuts. That's why we love tax cuts, because they pay for themselves, and you get to keep more of your money. It's like a win-win-win-win to infinity and beyond win. Yeah, that's why we love it. So again, she's got a degree from a good university, but she still doesn't get it. She does not get that economics based on feelings gives you Venezuela. Government control of the means of production, Venezuela. People who haven't lived long enough to even understand what they're talking about, like her, put them in charge, you get Venezuela. We don't need any more people who don't understand a balance sheet and zero-based budgeting to be in charge of anything. And the fact that she's actually going to take that, what you just heard right there, to Congress, she's actually going to sit in there and be paid by the taxpayers to peddle this nonsense. That in and of itself is a crime. But we have representative government, and people are allowed to elect who they want to go and represent them. And apparently she's it. I know it sounds crazy. It doesn't make any sense, but there it is. So I just, I want to be fair. I want to hear all sides. But after hearing so much of what I've had to hear from her and how it's not based on any kind of economics we've ever heard of that are factual anywhere, it's kind of unbelievable, yet there it is. It's still there. And so she's been getting into, just in case you're wondering what she's been up to, she's been getting into these slap fights with people online on Twitter and Instagram and so on and so forth. And the reason she keeps getting into these slap fights is because she keeps saying things that don't make any sense. So apparently, she feels like having to answer questions, people asking her to answer questions, people getting her, getting her statements, what she considers to be wrong, that's sexism. So Ben Shapiro, who is a master debater, has actually challenged Ocasio-Cortez to a debate. And he's the editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire. He has his own, wildly popular radio offerings and things like that. And on Wednesday, he offered to donate $10,000 to her campaign if she agreed to debate or even discuss any topics that she covers in her campaign on his Sunday special. He said they could even use the money to raise money for a charity. She refused to respond, but after she was documented in her silence, she said, "It's like catcalling. I don't owe a response to unsolicited requests from men with bad intentions. And also, like catcalling, they feel entitled to a response." That's where she goes when she can't answer. All right, we'll be back with Charles Lehman right after these messages. Stay there.
When our health insurance renewal notice arrived last fall, my wife and I made the decision to drop our plan. With the monthly premiums and deductible, we'd have to pay $30,000 just to use it. So we did our homework and switched to MediShare. The cost savings are incredible, over $500 a month, and we don't have to pay for services we don't need or don't agree with. Then, out of the blue, she had to have emergency surgery. Scary stuff. $150,000 in hospital bills, and MediShare members took care of everything. All we paid was our small portion. I'm a doctor who's been in healthcare for 20 years, and this is one of the most impressive programs I've ever seen. Thank God she's fully recovered, and now we're telling everyone about MediShare.
Call 855-PSALM-23 to find out how much you can save on your healthcare. MediShare. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23.
Up next, Carol Swain with 2 minutes to think about it. From poverty to professor, from GED to PhD, a bold Christian speaking truth to power. Here's Carol with today's 2 minutes.
Hello, folks. We've recently had primary elections in Tennessee and other parts of the country. In these elections, many Christians found themselves divided over which candidate was most Christian and which would best serve the needs of the people. The primaries are now over, and now is the time for us to unite around biblically based values and principles. There are many hurt feelings and wounded egos. How about you? How have you responded to the election night news? Did you gloat when your candidate won, or did you pout and grumble? Pouting and grumbling and unforgiveness are not of the Lord Jesus Christ. In Matthew 5:9, Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, because they will be called the children of God." What about you? Are you a peacemaker? As we watch the decline of our nation, it is critically important that we unite around the candidates that come closest to our values, realizing that none are perfect. As imperfect human beings, we regularly make mistakes that require confession and forgiveness. Unity is important for the body of Christ. The world carefully watches us to see how closely our lives line up with the Word of God. We can be peacemakers, and we can still hold our leaders accountable for their actions. Proverbs 27:17 states, "As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another." Let's work together for victories that glorify Christ.
To learn more about Carol and the Carol Swain Foundation, visit carolmswain.net and make sure you follow her on Facebook at Professor Carol M. Swain and on Twitter at Carol M. Swain.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey, welcome back to the program. Head over to AFR.net, hit the subscribe button. Also find American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk on Facebook. You can like those pages, and then you have to select that you want to see them first so that you can get the notifications, because Facebook tries to clear up the clutter for you. So you have to unclear it by selecting what you really want to look at. Great content on both of those pages. And, of course, you can find me, as we've mentioned, Stacey on the Right, on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. So right now I want to welcome Charles Lehman, staff writer for the award-winning Washington Free Beacon. Charles, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about this family leave proposal. First of all, how does it work when the government of the United States of America decides we support family leave?
Yeah. So since about 1993, the federal government has mandated that all employers give families unpaid family leave. I think it's up to 3 months. And this is a proposal that's been kicked around in the White House by Ivanka Trump, who's an advisor, of course, the president's daughter, and then in the Senate, the proponent of this plan is Marco Rubio. What they want to do is find a way to implement paid family leave, a system whereby, you're taking family leave to take care of a newborn child, or if somebody's sick, and you don't have to give up your paycheck. So the proposal that Rubio announced, which I've written a little bit about, focuses primarily, the way that it works is, rather than raising new taxes or introducing a new spending proposal or compelling businesses to continue to pay their employees, it allows new parents and other people who want to take family leave to draw on their Social Security payments from the future and then retire a little bit later subsequently. So, for example, if I'm a new parent, I can draw – there's a complicated formula involved, but something like 70% of my income from Social Security for, let's say, about 3 months. And then when I'm 65, I retire. The retirement age for me is moved up to 65 years and 3 months to sort of counterbalance the money that I spent when I wanted to take family leave when I was a new father.
All right. So do you support this idea?
Well, I think that there are pros and cons to it. On the one hand, I think that, look, America, like much of the Western world, is in the middle of what we're talking about as a baby bust. We're having fewer kids than we need to have in order to keep growing the population. I think there's a good argument that that's a big problem socially. And a big part of the reason is that when you ask parents why they aren't having kids, it's because having kids is really expensive. If you look at cash transfer programs for families in other countries like Hungary or Russia or Singapore, they kind of work. They do okay. And I think that this is a potentially good way to sort of do a revenue-neutral form of that. On the other hand, I think, pretty concerned about adding to the burden of Social Security. It seems to me, Social Security is going to be insolvent come 2034. Mm-hmm. That's going to be, according to the current projections. That's a big problem. And if a bunch of new people start drawing on their Social Security, I think that could hasten insolvency. So, I think there are pros and cons to the proposal.
So that's what I was looking for. And to be honest with you, Charles, I honestly, anything that doesn't actually add to the bottom line of the federal government and doesn't create a new program that encourages families in the only way that the government can, which is, kind of getting out of the way. If it encourages people to have children and to kind of increase their family size and works, in a way that I support that. But my problem is almost every government program we have, it sounded just as good as this one in the beginning. It always sounds fantastic in, when you can put together a video as Marco Rubio has done. And it's like he's talking about this and you can hear how passionate he is about the subject. I've got no problem with Ivanka Trump trying to find ways to make parenthood more viable for women who've gone to college and gotten degrees and they want their career, but they also want to have a family. I have no problem with any of that. But my issue stems from, I know a government program in and of itself, even when you say this isn't a government program, but the government's going to say to employers, you have to let people stay off of work for this amount of time, and the government's going to pay this money to them. There becomes, again, a new set of unintended consequences that can come to bear that will come back to bite us later.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that the best government family programs are those programs that try to compensate for the ways that the government gets in the way of the family. So Rubio is, I think, sort of on a kick right now about family policy. He and Mike Lee a couple of months ago had this expanded child tax credit. Part of the goal of the child tax credit is basically it's more expensive to raise kids, and we don't want the tax burden to fall unevenly on families. We want there to be fairness between families and people who don't have kids, acknowledging that fairness may mean that kind of tax cut. And I think when this Social Security idea was first, so it sort of floated around policy circles for 8 years ago, 7 years ago, something like that. And the whole idea there was to offset the way in which basically families can be thought of as paying into Social Security twice, where I pay into Social Security and then I'm also responsible for raising my kid who will pay into Social Security. And the idea is to give families some disproportionate access to Social Security to offset the way that they otherwise are contributing to the program more than their unmarried peers otherwise do in society. So I think it's right. Every program has unintended consequences, and I can see lots of things that go wrong. You know, paid family leave is almost certainly partially responsible for making it harder for women to get hired because employers know that they might need to take, or excuse me, paid family leave, because they know that women are more likely to take family leave. But on the other hand, I think that, again, those are the best programs, the ones that try to get government out of the way or try to compensate for government's negative impacts on the family. And this potentially does that. And, you know, the other argument is businesses are always going to be considered the family, and it matters in the sort of fair society that I want that the family is a preserved entity and that the family is a respected entity, and that we make sure that people can carve out time for themselves and their family. That's the sort of society I think we want to live in.
I agree. I do want to live in that kind of society. And I think, you know, for us, because this was, you know, my kids are 18, 17, and 15. So when I was expecting our kids and we were kind of going through this is what my husband's workplace offers. This is what, you know, you can do. I was at the time working, so I did actually go on maternity leave for our oldest child and then decided to stay home with the subsequent ones. And we even learned at that point, you know, you really don't care about the child tax credit until you have a kid. So then you're like, oh, wait, we do get, you know, we're going to get to claim this extra bit because we now have a child. And so as we began to learn about it, I noticed, you know, there's not a lot offered for, you know, if your wife has a child and you're working, it's not like your workplace goes out of their way to try to accommodate that. And the longer you stay away from work, the less likely it is that you're going to have the exact same duties when you get back, even when you're promised that. So I want to be realistic about this. And it sounds fantastic, but I wish there was some other, you know, how the GAO will do, you know, a study of something or, you know, the CBO will say this is what the true cost is. I would just want to be so utterly, transparently clear and certain that there aren't these weird clawback, unintended consequences of doing something like this, because it sounds wonderful. I feel like I'm opposed to it. I could be convinced otherwise, but the only reason I'm opposed is because every single thing that has to do with the government is not as well run as the private sector, and Social Security doesn't even have any money in it now. Every day we're basically paying money out of thin air. We make the money and pay it based on so the people who work now pay for the people who are retired now, when it's supposed to be the people who are retired now taking their own money back out of a savings account that has drawn, you know, interest and all that. This whole thing is like a Ponzi scheme, not the people paying in, but the actual drawing out of the money because it's already been looted.
Mm-hmm. Right. And this is really right. And this is really the problem that's exacerbated by the fact that Social Security, that the distribution of the age in the population right now is such that there are a whole bunch of people who are starting to claim Social Security as baby boomers age into retirement. And so people of younger generations are not there are not enough people. I think we're approaching something like 2 workers or 3 workers for every retired person, which is not enough. And I think, insolvency of Social Security is a really huge problem that nobody ever wants to deal with. The best answer that one can give there in the context of the Rubio plan is one of the ways that we solve the problem of Social Security is by having more kids. Because in principle, as far as one can say Social Security works, Social Security works best when there are a lot of young people, not a lot of old people. We're going to keep having smaller and smaller generations so long as that we aren't having more than 2 kids per person. We're having more than 1 kid per couple. That's one of the longer term solutions. That said, I absolutely share your concerns. I just think that from a practical perspective, there are so many different ways in which the families and institutions get short shrift in American policy today that I'm pretty predisposed to like those policies that go out of their way to say, yes, the family is good and we want to support it. And I think that, making the choice to stay in the workforce or leave the labor force, it is good for policymakers to think, to the extent they can, to think about how they can cushion the choice to stay out of the labor force where, it is good to have a society where one parent can opt to stay home. Those kids often do better over the lifespan if both of their parents aren't working. I think it is always right to be skeptical of programs that the government wants to implement. I think that one reason not to skeptical of this program is that short term it doesn't introduce new spending. But on the other hand, I think where policy will always policymakers are always going to be making decisions. They're always going to be trying to come up with new solutions, and I prefer those solutions that say yes to the family and yes to try to encourage people to have more kids and try to encourage people to take 3 months to read their kids, because that first 2 months really matters for how people do with the rest of their lives.
Well, you know what? You've gone a long way to moving me into a much more open position towards this, because I watched the video a few days ago. I watched it right on your website. I'm on there every day. And I watched it and I thought, why do I feel like I felt like a little spidey sense tingling, like, whoa, what do you mean the government's going to mandate paid and you can borrow it from an account that's already empty? I have to say where the rubber meets the road for me is something that we talk about often on this program, Charles, and that is that we don't have enough young couples having enough children to, replacement rate 2.3. We're well below that now at 1.7. And we need to be ratcheting that number up, not down. And sometimes the government does do a good job of incentivizing behavior. Often that behavior is not the behavior we want, but the government can actually incentivize people to do things. So if this would go a ways into making people more comfortable, I'd love to see it. I don't know what I would have done, though, to be quite honest with you, if my husband had stayed off for 90 days when I had a baby. He wouldn't have stayed off that long. I think he probably would have lasted 3 weeks, maybe 4. And then he would have wanted to go back to work, not because he doesn't like us or anything, but he just would have wanted to be working. And it was nice that he went to work and then he came home in the evening and, I was home with the baby all day. It was, once you get past the initial stage of being, postpartum, you don't have to have 2 people at home. So I do think this is worth looking into further, and especially if the numbers are supported that would show that it would actually make a market increase in people deciding to have children, then it's something that possibly could be good to try. You certainly have some good arguments for it, I have to say, and I appreciate you coming on today and sharing the information and for the work over there at the Free Beacon. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Glad to appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Thanks, Charles. I'll talk to you again soon. Have a great weekend. That was Charles Lehman, staff writer for the Washington Free Beacon. We love having our experts on from the websites that we like to go to a lot. So I have to say, we're now in the end of the first week. We survived. I survived. And I thought it was a good week, and I look forward to the show getting better and being even more fun than it already is, and having more great guests. And I encourage you, we do have a contact form at StaceyOnTheRight.com. If you have tips, story tips, or interview tips, or things that you want to share, you can always reach out that way. I see those emails myself. I read them myself, and it's always a pleasure to get to interact with people. And we have Friday. It's Friday, which is interesting. We have a lot of just really quick news hits. Chairman of the RNC, Ronna McDaniel, actually said we're ready to defy history this November. She believes that they're running the largest field program that the RNC has ever had, training over 20,000 volunteers to go knock doors and engage with voters. And she's saying that they're in 28 states right now, and they have 540 staff on the ground. And even though history tells us that the party in the White House loses in the midterms, she's ready to defy history. So we'll see what actually comes of that. And yesterday was the day that they had kind of like both candidates for the Senate in the state of Missouri went to the Missouri Farm Bureau, and they worked and were interviewed individually by a committee of individuals on the Missouri Farm Bureau. They have a committee that does their endorsements. And today, the Missouri Farm Bureau has announced that they've endorsed Josh Hawley for the U.S. Senate. That doesn't automatically mean he's going to win, but the Missouri Farm Bureau does have an extensive network of individuals who use their insurance services and are farmers or landowners who listen to the recommendations that they make. So I will be bringing news from both ends of the political spectrum on the U.S. Senate race here in the state of Missouri and, of course, all over the country as news breaks and as time permits. Right now, we're going to go to the break. And when we get back, yes, we're going to talk about players taking a knee and the president's tweets about the players taking a knee. Yeah, gird your loins. We'll be right back. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. California leads the way in what not to do with their latest Band-Aid for fatherlessness, paying those most likely to commit a crime a stipend of up to $1,000 a month. Mayor Michael Tubbs faces a tough situation in his city. Stockton, California has persistently high crime and poverty. His solution isn't one that he came by lightly. He grew up with an incarcerated father and a mother who often used public assistance. He worked hard and graduated from Stanford. Tubbs believes that giving people a leg up financially by incentivizing good behavior will make the difference. This is what happens when society normalizes and promotes the wrong behaviors. We must return to our traditional viewpoints on marriage and family. Kids with fathers in the home are far less likely to commit crimes leading to incarceration. Proverbs 4:1 says, "Hear, O sons, a father's instruction, and be attentive that you may gain insight, for I give you good precepts. Do not forsake my teaching." I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at staceyontheright.com.
Yo, what's up?
Hey, what's nothing much, man. Just trying to listen to this last song for the music final.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna fail for the most part. I haven't even listened to it.
Ugh, yeah, me neither. I've been too busy listening to The Word on the Street.
The Word on the Street?
Wait, you guys haven't heard?
No, I haven't heard of
not
it.
me.
Not that one.
Well, check this out.
There is only one true word, and that is the Word of God, which is what you will hear on Word on the Street, hosted by me, Victory McIntosh. Tune in as we discuss some of the latest hot topics and life issues and filter them all through the holy Word of God. It is possible to live righteous before the Lord and enjoy doing it. Tune in Saturday mornings at 9 Central Time. You don't want to miss it.
I'm Chad Pergram with the Speaker's Lobby. The Senate Judiciary Committee is processing hundreds of thousands of documents pertaining to Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley plans a confirmation hearing in September. The vote on the floor could be tight. Republicans hold a narrow 51-49 edge over Democrats in the Senate, effectively 50-49 with GOP Arizona Senator John McCain out. So far, most analysts are focused on whether Democrats like Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota and Joe Manchin of West Virginia will vote for Kavanaugh, and if Republicans like Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska will vote no. However, there's a bigger wild card. Democratic Alabama Senator Doug Jones. Jones is a conservative Democrat in a state which supports President Trump, and Jones could be the difference in a narrowly divided Senate.
I am prepared to vote for a presidential nominee. The question is whether or not I'm prepared to vote for this particular conservative justice.
Jones says he doesn't see himself as a rubber stamp for President Trump, and despite being the key vote, contends he doesn't feel any pressure. With the Speaker's Lobby, Chad Pergram, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
24 of the 32 NFL teams were in action last night. Granted, it was just the first preseason game, but we did see several player demonstrations during the national anthem.
President Trump tweeting this morning the NFL players are at it again, taking a knee when they should be standing proudly for the national anthem. He went on to tweet, "Stand proudly for your national anthem or be suspended without pay." In Miami, Kenny Stills taking a knee, while defensive safety Robert Quinn, you can see him raising his fist in the air. Philadelphia Eagles safety Malcolm Jenkins also raising a fist during the anthem. The NFL said on Thursday it will not discipline players for any protests during the national anthem while it attempts to reach a resolution with the NFL Players Association over its anthem policy, which they're working on right now. But the league reiterated that for now, players and personnel on the field are expected to stand during the presentation of the flag and performance of the anthem. Personnel who do not wish to do so can choose to remain in the locker room.
The teams are also working on their own individual policies. Hopefully they get it done before the season starts, which is 4 weeks from yesterday.
But if you have a league policy and then you have a team policy that don't go together,
right,
there is no policy.
Well, and the Jets acting owner said that if there is an NFL policy where the players will be suspended or fined, he's going to pay for it. So it's all to be determined.
Yeah, I personally wish that the president wouldn't tweet about this because we have such other really, really pressing issues. And I think, again, he's going to do whatever he wants. But I think this is kind of a waste of his valuable, 55 million people follow him on Twitter. There's other stuff I would love to see him engage on. And he does a great job. And you guys know I've covered that here in the program. I gave a running list a couple of days ago of just how fantastic he's been so far on the issues. He's been far more conservative than, in my opinion, a John McCain or a Mitt Romney would have been, because they would have caved on some very key things that the president refused to give up on. And when he stood his ground, he won. And over and over and over again, he's shown that if you're just willing to keep pressing the issue, whether it's with our foreign leaders or international relationships, North Korea, regulations here at home, the business part of the tax reform package, the fact that he's going to go at it again and do tax reform part 2, these are things that Mitt Romney and John McCain would not have pursued. They would have caved at the first sign of resistance. And so, credit where credit is due. But I do think the tweeting about the NFL distracts away from these much more serious accomplishments. We'll see if he continues to go forward with it. He seems to really have a thing about the NFL and doing that whole bit. Now, in news that's funny and really just, I was laughing. A friend of mine texted this to me this morning. And it's a story about this conservative artist. He's in Hollywood and he's done these huge graphic portrayals of politicians before. He mocks leftist politicians in the state of California, and he kind of balances out the inequality that exists in California for the conservative viewpoint. So you've got the story has been developing over the past few weeks with unhinged people on the left taking sledgehammers and destroying the president's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Now, I'm not sure what they think this does to President Trump. Like, when he hears that his star has been destroyed, does it decrease his power, like on Super Mario when you bump into one of those other little animals, the turtles, and then you shrink down some and you're no longer super? That's not how this works. But they've destroyed the star twice. So, yeah, this guy replaced them. Now, these are laminated vinyl stars, and they've been placed. They all say Donald Trump. They look, it's very hard to tell that they're not really real stars. These vinyl stars have been laminated onto empty spots around stars who hate Donald Trump. And some of the tweets that were sent out by the site that is there's a Twitter account. It's like this fascinating story. There's a Twitter account that's been covering this, and the Twitter account actually has been kind of tweeting out, like, mocking the people who hate Donald Trump and don't want his star to be there. So the Twitter account that's covering this it's for The Faction. So at The Faction 1776, posted videos of men dressed as construction workers, and they were placing dozens of laminated replica Donald Trump stars along the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The sophisticated operation involved the stars, which look identical to the real stars, being placed in various arrangements around the stars of various left-wing activists like Rob Reiner. Now, here's what's so funny about it. The Twitter handle is said to belong to the famed street artist Sabo. He's the one who does these very in-your-face satirical paintings, and he'll do, the graphic art that you'll see on the back of a park bench or a city bus bench, and they have these inserts that you can put in. He's put inserts in there. And so he's tweeted out, he says, "Take down his star and we will descend upon you with 30 fresh new stars." And then he tweeted, "We will further spread Trump derangement syndrome by installing a never-ending stream of stars." So I think it's funny because the West Hollywood City Council actually voted that President Trump's star should be removed because they're tired of replacing it, and also because they have Trump derangement syndrome. They say that they disagree with Trump on moral and political grounds. Now, remember, they have stars who have been commemorated on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, who have committed adultery, who've committed to suicide, who've admitted to drug abuse, who've been accused of sexual harassment and sexual assault. Their stars remain, but Donald Trump should come down. Okay. So the interesting fact about the West Hollywood resolution is that it's a ceremonial resolution. The city of West Hollywood has no jurisdiction over the star. The jurisdiction over the Trump star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame actually belongs to Los Angeles Tourist Board, and experts say they're unlikely to do anything to remove the star. Why? Well, we don't know because they haven't weighed in, but Kevin Spacey, Bill Cosby, Michael Jackson, those stars all remain in place untouched in spite of multiple rape and child molestation allegations and the unfortunate conviction of Bill Cosby in this most recent case that he's just gone through. See how reality just keeps Trump derangement syndrome from fully achieving its goals? You can't get full synergy when you have other people on the Hollywood Walk of Fame who've been accused of and one person convicted of actions that the president has there are no convictions. Sorry. So you can say whatever you want, but no convictions. So, yeah. That brings me to our last one. And this is going to get your dander up, but your blood will be pumping and you can go take a nice walk outside after the show. University of Minnesota. Now, I know what you're thinking. What could be wrong? What could possibly be the issue? Well, they're considering a policy on misgendering. In other words, if you're a student there, students on the first day of school, this has already happened to our oldest child. When you go to class the first day, what they do is, as a part of your taking attendance, they'll have everyone go around the room and state what gender they'd like to be referred to as, Z, V, non-gender, whatever. Here are some of the options: he, him, his, none, prefer not to specify, she, her, hers, they, them, theirs. So if you refer to a single person as a they, them, or theirs, because they have more than one thing in them, and others. It's not like there's like any sense to this. You can even declare whatever, like make up a word and that's your gender. You can do that too. So what they're doing is, at the University of Minnesota, they're considering this draft form of a new gender policy, and the draft form would make it possible for a biological male to not only shower and share locker rooms with women if they declared they were a woman, but they would also be assigned by their declared gender to the dormitories. So if you, let's say you're a freshman, you're incoming, you're expecting to be paired with a girl as your roommate because you're going to share a bathroom, you're going to share a bedroom where you would dress. You expect to be in a room with another girl. You get there and you're standing there looking at a biological male who's wearing a dress, has a beard, has on eyeshadow, has hair curled. You go and object to it. This policy would mandate that you would be expelled. You either have to stay in the room with the man or be expelled. You could also be expelled for calling someone whose gender is Z. If you say, oh, I heard her question and I'd like to piggyback onto that, or I'm wondering about that too. She's right. You could be expelled for saying that. Now, obviously, this is a free speech concern. If you can be expelled for simply stating something that's not criminal, or, I mean, the criminalization of speech is what this amounts to. So some people have already made it clear that they're not sure if this policy can stand. But my question really surrounds just the absolute inanity of having a university implement policies like this that are invariably going to mean fewer students enroll because they don't want to spend all your, just think of all the things you have to go through. You have to apply, get approved, work through your finances and your financial aid, get all of that lined up, go to the university, attend the university. You're invested there now. You've moved in. You've got all that stuff your parents helped you move in, or maybe you're an adult, you know, a whole truckload, van load, whatever, you move into the dorm, you get settled in and you misgender someone who is clearly mentally ill and they expel you from the school and you got to go start somewhere else. Not to mention the negative mark on your grades and everything, your transcript, because you were expelled. Why would anyone want to submit themselves to that? And this is the crazy pants, inane, ludicrous, you know, pants on fire type stuff that parents have to put up with. And make no mistake about it, I know as a mom of 2 girls, our son too, I don't want my son in a dorm room with a woman who is convinced that although her body is a female body, she's a man. She dresses like a man, and she's going to be in there at the same time my son is, you know, getting ready for bed. And I don't want that. Why would any parent want that? And so just that statement means, well, Stacy's a bigot. Stacy's just afraid of, she's got homophobia. She's got transphobia. I'm not afraid. This isn't about fear. It's about wanting control over the environment where your kids are going to be. And anyone who, you know, anyone who says, well, it's just because you're bigoted, what they're doing is they're deflecting. They're actually trying to make this the issue me and my concerns, or other parents and their concerns. Anyone who has a concern about their child, that's what they want to do. This is what we're dealing with right now. And again, universities that are having trouble with freshmen coming in and being prepared to do freshman level work, universities are having to deal with parents who literally think they can drive down to the university and negotiate their kids' grades, parents who call the university and ask to speak to professors. They want to try to change what the professor has told their kid they need to do to improve their work. And then on top of all of that, they have to deal with an increasingly mentally ill population that's coming in and trying to basically destroy the university, because that's what this amounts to. Forcing a girl to live in a room with a man she does not know, who also thinks he's a woman. We don't even know what else could possibly be wrong with him. How does that increase or help with recruiting quality students who want to come to your university and get an education? Because that should be the primary goal of policies that you implement at a university. First primary mission is to make sure that the university is educating students and giving them a quality product that they can utilize to go out and start their professional careers. That's primary goal 1. Goal 2 is to have the entire campus environment be conducive to learning and to creating a collegial atmosphere in which kids can grow, increase their critical thinking, garner work skills and life skills that will help them when they reach the professional world. This does not do that. I mean, again, and I hate to just harp on that one portion, but is there anybody else who just looks at like the possibility you show up to school, you've got all your stuff, you brought your parents and your siblings and y'all are you move into the dorm, and you move in, you bring your first piece of luggage up in your little dorm microwave and your Keurig, and you put your stuff on the floor and try to figure out which bed is yours. Because all of these dorms, like there are very few campuses that have every single dorm is single occupancy. Most freshman dorms are double or triple or even quadruple occupancy, where you're living with at least one other person. Sometimes it's 4 people and you have one bathroom that's split into 2. I mean, come on. You get there, You go into the dorm room, you put some of your stuff down, and you turn around, and in come some people, and you're like, oh, my roommate. And on the form that you were given, it said your roommate was Jenny Jones. And so you reach out to shake hands with the girl, and no, this is Jenny. And you reach over to shake that hand, and it's a 6'2" tall, 250-pound man with lipstick and some camo leggings on. Oh, you better believe we would be picking up our stuff and moving back out of that room and going down to the front desk and getting another room. And if it meant expulsion, then we'd just be packing all our stuff back into the vehicle and starting over again. And attorneys would be called, because that is ridiculous. How do you put a stop to it, though? It's like these places have to go out of business. Anyway, that's the show. And that's the week. You guys, God bless. Have a fantastic weekend. Lord willing, be back with you fresh and bushy-tailed on Monday.
The views and opinions